guess we'll go ahead and get started since everybody that I know for sure was going to be in attendance has joined now. So good evening, everyone. It's July 20th, 2022, and just after 5:30 p.m. And I'd like to call the July meeting of the Community Development and Assistance Program Advisory Board to order. So if we can go into the roll call, please.
Natasha Coleman.
Present.
Emily English.
Present.
Jacob Davies.
Present.
Susan Gardner. Tim Shepard.
Present.
Gladys Tiffany.
Present.
Vincent Wade. I can see Vincent's here, but I didn't hear him say he's here.
Present.
Thanks.
So first off, we have public comment, which I'm not seeing anyone, but Kelly, do you have anybody?
Yeah, no, there's nobody in the attendees section.
Okay. Perfect.
If that changes, I'll make you all aware.
Thank you. And since the next one actually was an update from Susan, I'm going to go ahead and reach out to her after our meeting and just see, if we want to continue the efforts on that. And if so, if we need to regroup to kind of give her some assistance there or what we need to do exactly.
Good idea.
So the next on the agenda is the CDEP role and opportunities. And I feel like there was just a lot of questions that have come up in the last month that I thought it would be good for us to just kind of go over the community members' role and how we can utilize our role going forward to benefit the community, and then kind of go over, whatever concerns that we still had or any questions that might need to be addressed.
I was going to ask how you wanted. I was going to ask how you wanted to approach it.
It is up to you. I didn't know if you wanted to get into it or if you'd rather me start with the kind of remaining questions that I had put together based on kind of some feedback and my own personal just follow up on some things. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go over those first and then get into it?
Why don't we do that? Because I'd rather make sure I'm answering and giving you the information you want than just making my best guess at what I think you want to know. So why don't we start there?
Perfect. And I do appreciate your help on this too. So one of the things that was mentioned in the email correspondence was highlighting the fact of the 2022 action plan that was available on the city page. And so I just wanted to first clarify, because I did find that on the city page, but I did not find anything regarding this specific reallocation being included in it. So I wasn't sure if I was overlooking something or looking at the wrong one that would have referenced the documentation. The reallocation was the CARES Act COVID money that we received. And that was part of the 2019 action plan. It was an amendment to the 2019 action plan. So no, it's not reflected in the current year action plan because we're reallocating money from the CARES Act amendment that was done to the 2019 action plan. Okay. Making myself a note on that one.
What are the calendar dates of the 2019 action plan?
Well, so the 2019 action plan was for the year 2019. When the CARES Act grant money became available in 2020, the 2020 action plan wasn't in place yet because the CARES Act money came out before that. So we had to amend the 2019 action plan. Some communities amended their 2019 action plan. Some amended their 2020 action plan. We amended our 2019 because the 2020 action plan had not been completed yet. So the announcement for the reallocation specified that it was a reallocation to the 2019 action plan, or within the 2019 action plan.
Okay, maybe that's where I had misread something, because I was looking on the city's page and I was having trouble finding it, and I wasn't sure, when it's reallocated like that, if the whole documentation surrounding it is put forward or just the specific document as far as the change made. I wasn't really sure how that portion of it works. So can you still access old information on the city website? Like, is there a certain time limit on what documentation you can find?
We have tended to only post the most recent action plan and caper on the website, because in general, that's what people want to look at. That doesn't mean that we couldn't post older, but I don't believe the older ones are currently posted on the website.
So just in the efforts of just clarification and making sure that we're understanding, would it be possible to get a copy of that somehow, just so we can look over the original action plan related to that money, just kind of understand from start to finish how this process better works, so we kind of are more familiar with things, I should say.
And also probably any summary of public comment that came out about the action plan. I don't know if public comment is then incorporated into revisions of the action plans, or if they're just submitted along with the action plan. That's also, I guess, another education question for myself.
So if, when we do public comment or we do an amendment, yes, any public comment we receive during the public comment period gets submitted to HUD along with the request for reallocation in this instance, or the action plan or the caper. Yes, all of that gets submitted.
So does that mean that how would we access that information?
So let me figure out what we're going to do. I mean, at the very least, I can send it to y'all. But what comes out of this meeting is we're going to just keep a certain number of past years on the website, then it'll get posted there. So I'll figure out, we'll have an internal discussion about what the best way to do that moving forward is. And so either way, I will get that information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. And then regarding, while we're on the subject of action plan, there was actually a couple questions that we had come up with related to just the review of the current one. And one thing was that there was mention of there not being any modification found within the 5-year plan from 2020 to 2025 to include COVID conditions. Is that something that was separate from the action plan, or how exactly is that figured in?
Okay, can you repeat that?
Okay, so the comment was received that there wasn't anything found related to a modification for COVID conditions on the 5-year plan from the 2020 to 2025. So I'm not sure if that's meaning the most recent action plan. That might be a question I need to follow back up on.
Okay, so the most recent consolidated plan, the COVID money was not part of that. The COVID money was part of the 2019 action plan. So no, there wasn't anything in the 5-year the most recent 5-year con plan, because the CARES Act COVID money was not part of that.
Are you asking Natasha, though, about community priorities? Is that what you're trying to add? I don't know what the comment was.
The question was just related to the fact that there wasn't any mention of the COVID found in this current action plan. So just trying to determine, was this funding on it something different, or, where exactly that was taken into account if it was not done through this, I think was the original intent of that question. I do have a few additional ones kind of along the same line, so I'm hopefully conveying the correct information. If any of you guys send me any comments, please feel free to interject and correct me if I'm mistaken. let's see. I think the next question does kind of get into Emily's point, though. As far as the programs that are currently addressed in the action plan,
Mhm.
regarding the scope of truly meeting the needs of the community, is there more information as far as, details on the participants to the programs? I had called attention to the Hearth program because of the fact that I'd seen that there was like 206, I think, participants as of a newsletter last year. And this, the most recent one she had sent had 208. So just kind of getting a better view of how many participants we're seeing. Where would we best gauge that information from?
That would be in the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report.
If it's not included in that, then it did not receive any funding from the community resources as far as HUD is concerned. Is that correct? Or
Everything we do each year is reported in the CAPER, everything we do with our CDBG funds.
okay,
And so the Hearth program, that's a completely separate grant. Hearth is not funded by CDBG. The Hearth case managers are funded by CDBG because their salaries are our match for the Hearth grant. The Hearth grant, the COC SNAPS grant that funds the Hearth program has a match requirement. And the CDBG paying for the case managers is how we make that match.
okay.
But
That kind of explains it.
Hearth is not funded through CDBG funds. It's HUD funded, but it's a completely separate area of HUD.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that SNAPS grant then?
Okay, so the SNAPS grant, that's HUD Continuum of Care Special Needs Assistance Programs. That funds what we call our Hearth program, where we house homeless individuals. And so the money from that grant pays for rent deposits, utility deposits, rent assistance. It helps us to house the people and keep them housed. And then the case managers provide wraparound case management to support them, the participants in that program, in staying housed and working towards self-stability.
And who funds that?
So that's HUD also, but it's the COC SNAPS program.
Okay, separate program, but still through HUD.
Yes, it's a separate program and a separate grant.
Okay.
So community development block grant is one area of HUD. The COC, the Continuum of Care, SNAPS, Special Needs Assistance Program, that's another area of HUD. Public housing, that's another area of HUD. It's not part of us, but so HUD has lots of areas, and different areas have their own funding streams.
So there's others besides that?
I believe so. I'm not necessarily familiar with others because we don't have them, but HUD has lots of divisions and departments. So the two that we work with are the Community Development Block Grant, because we're an entitlement city, and then the money we get for the Hearth program.
Sounds like there's more we probably should understand about that.
Yeah, HUD asked us to take the COC grant on when the organization that had it couldn't do it any longer, and they didn't want Fayetteville to lose that money. So they approached the city and asked us to take that grant on. That's how we got into the arena of housing the homeless. And that was
So to that end,
they approached us in 2015 and we started housing in 2016. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Natasha.
oh no, you're fine. I just was wondering, is there anywhere that we can go to obtain accurate information as far as the breakdown of that, to kind of better understand, what groups into what group, so we know where our focus primarily should be? Like, I think part of the confusion is there's some that overlap, and are handled by, well, like you said, in the case of the one, there's some some of the funding comes from you guys, but not all of the funding. So how would we go about kind of differentiating how exactly that portion of it? And this might be something we covered before, but I just feel like we've got new members, and it's good to just kind of go back to the beginning on some of it.
I think it's also part of our conversation about our role as a committee. Is it, even though I think this was formed as part of like a CDBG best practice, looking at the city ordinance, it reads to me like it's about community development and assistance programs, not just CDBG funding, but also other things. So I think that's probably also where the confusion is, especially from the community's point of view, because they read that online and they think we are their conduit for any community assistance programs that the city offers. So maybe that's part of our conversation too, about slicing and dicing what community programs we get to be a part of or help provide information or connection to. I think that maybe that should be a question we ask ourselves, and we ask the city council and you all's office, Kelly, about what our role is in supporting the city in its community development and assistance programs, which includes CDBG, but does it include anything else? We don't have to solve that today. I'm just throwing it out there.
I'll be honest, I don't really necessarily know the assistance programs piece. We deal with the CDBG piece, and there aren't I'm trying to think of anybody else in the city, so there's CDBG, there's Hearth, but the Hearth funding is pretty specific. There's no assessment or anything that goes into it. It is what it is. So there's no, and all of that money goes towards housing people. So there's not really anything to be decided about that.
Is there any conduit for community feedback on that program?
I mean, certainly if people have questions or want to share thoughts with us, they can. There's no public comment or anything with that. The way that's, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but the way that's set up is once you establish the program, there's something called a grant and inventory worksheet that lists out what you anticipate housing with the money and things like that, the numbers of people. There's no public comment period or anything. It's simply, there's an annual renewal demand amount that the city, that the COC gets for any COC funded programs to apply for renewal and for new programs to apply. But it's set up differently than CDBG. There's not a public comment period and things like that. Those decisions are entirely made by HUD.
But it is managed by your office.
The Hearth program is, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Gladys.
Yes.
And Natasha, I'm sorry if I cut you off.
The grant process itself is managed by the Northwest Arkansas Continuum of Care.
So it comes to the city and then goes to the Continuum of Care?
No, so the Continuum of Care has member agencies and organizations, and so when it's time to renew the Hearth grants, we write the grants for our program, for the applications, and then we send them to the COC, and the COC submits a consolidated plan that has ours and any other organizations that are applying for the funding. It's kind of a complicated process, and I'm certainly happy to talk to you about it, but so the COC submits the consolidated plan for the Northwest Arkansas Continuum of Care, which is currently the programs we have.
Sorry, but I do not understand that at all. And I think that it would be very helpful to have a little bit better. I'd like to see diagrams about how all that works.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like to see, I told Kelly the other day, I'm sorry if I kind of go back over things that we've discussed, but I'm an analytical person and I like to see documentation and, just things lined out. It kind of helps my brain process things better. So I think any information we have, or even any place that you could direct us to, would be amazing, just so we can kind of understand the overview of things a little bit better.
So you can probably find some information on the process on the NWACOC website. I don't know if we currently have any charts or graphs around that, but I can certainly look at what we have and get that and anything we have, I can share that. But the COC website should have information about the process on it. I'll be honest, it's been a little while since I've been on the site, but
okay. Could you just say what the website is? Is it anything as simple as coc.org or anything?
Hang on just a second.
I found them. I'll pull together. HUD also has a
Okay, thank you.
website. I'll create an email list just for us and we can bounce stuff back and forth.
Okay, sounds
I'm
good.
gonna say, because I think it's just like NWACOC. It's .com. I was thinking it was .org,
Okay, okay.
but it's .com.
And kind of going along with that, there was an additional question that came about, just in kind of going about this whole discussion in the past month and overall, as far as, any audits, would that also be the COC department that is handling that? Or do you guys have your own in-department audits that take place? Or how exactly does that work, since it's kind of a broad spectrum of people involved?
Audits of our programs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the city has a citywide external audit that happens every year, and it's available I don't think this year's has been released yet. But when it's released, that's available on the city website. And some years we're selected to have more intensive, for them to look at us more intensively than other years. Then HUD monitors us on a regular basis. And HUD it's the money we have is HUD money. So HUD is the primary entity that audits us, so to speak. They call it monitoring. But they come in and monitor periodically. And we have always had very good monitoring visits.
And can we have access to finding out, to seeing those audits too?
So they send a monitoring letter. Let me find out. I believe the only thing we get is the letter after the monitoring event, but let me double check on that.
Okay. Yeah, more than the letter would be great if you have access to that. Would love to see that.
And I'd also like to jump back to kind of Emily's sentiment about the board and the role and purpose. There's a few questions I have, especially as the newest board member. I'm just trying to get clarification on a couple things. With, I guess, this reallocation as an example, the description of our board to raise community awareness of assistance programs, to advise Community Resources Division, and the City Council on CDBG funds, other funding. How come this reallocation wasn't ran by or mentioned to our board for any type of advisement?
So reallocations, one, they don't happen very often. And when they do, they're administrative in nature. So the advising on our budget the role that you play in that is the subrecipient grant process, the public services and the public facilities use of the money. So what happens with about the only time we do reallocations is if something comes up that's going to affect the timeliness of spending money out. And the mortgage assistance money that we had allocated was not moving out the door. And so HUD basically told us we needed to do something about that. And so that's where the reallocation came about.
So would you say that the housing assistance and the, however we're reallocating these dollars are not public services or programs?
Well, it wasn't, we weren't doing an application process. We were reallocating money. There are a lot of restrictions on how the COVID money can be used. We were able to use the first round of COVID money for rental assistance because nobody else was offering rental assistance. That's no longer an option for us to use it for that, which a lot of the feedback we were getting was, why aren't we using it for rental assistance? We can't use the C1. So being able to use it for rental assistance at the beginning of COVID was an exception to the HUD rules. They provided a waiver that allowed communities to do that. But that waiver that allowed us to provide rental assistance doesn't allow us to duplicate rental assistance. And since the money that the $230,000 that we helped people with in 2020, since then, there has been money from the money that the county got, the money that EOA got for COVID rental assistance. Some of the ESG programs got money for rental assistance. We no longer have any methodology to verify that we're not duplicating assistance that's being provided by others. There's no way. So that was not an option for this money, for this reallocation. Doesn't mean that that's not a community need. It means that it wasn't. And if we utilize the money in a way that we can't fully document to HUD that we're not violating any rules or duplicating any services, we very much put the city in a position of potentially having to pay that money back. And we've never had to pay any money back to HUD, and we don't ever want to have to pay any money back.
So to that end, Kelly, oh, sorry, go ahead, Gladys.
I'm not disagreeing with anything you said, Kelly, because I'm sure you're much more familiar with that than I am. However, one thing I do want to kind of move to is that I really do feel like the role that the department is considering for this board is much more limited than the role that the city was originally thinking of for it. And I really do think that now that we've had a year of experience, and I recently reviewed the document that was our founding document from the city council, and feel like there's a lot more included in that than we have been talking about. And I really do think that we need to go back and begin from that document and think about the work of this board in a different way than we have before. And I'd like to hear what other people on the board think about that, but I do feel like that you're not correct in your assessment of what our role actually is.
I just took a moment to try to find that same piece of information. I couldn't find it as quickly as I wanted to gather my thoughts, but I agree with you, Gladys. I think the original spirit that was intended when they wrote the ordinance to create this board was, beyond just CDBG. It was to include other funds, other community development and assistance program funding. And I think, I think this certainly falls under that. And I keep hearing the term that something is administrative in nature. My understanding is the role of this board is to oversee the administration.
You're an advisory board.
Okay.
You're not an oversight board. You're an advisory board.
I think that's not what the founding document says.
That was my understanding when I read it as well. Was to kind of eliminate the staff-only decision process and to kind of break that cycle of staff-only decisions.
So
I will say, I think that there's a lot of nuance in the words we're using. So, I mean, I know that from Kelly's perspective, the words administration and oversight and advisory board versus committee, like they all mean something, especially in, and I'm not trying to say that my fellow board members don't understand, but I am saying that oversight has some very kind of strict guidelines around what that means. And so our ability to understand kind of those nuances is also something we need to be educated on. But however, to your point, Vincent, and to Gladys's point, when we read that ordinance, it is more than just CDBG program public services, $85,000 and another $85,000, that comes out every year. And so I agree that we should revisit that document and figure out where and how, and so that we're all clear on it, so that we don't run into these places.
So the reason that I say that where your advisement comes in is through the subrecipient grant program is because staff salaries and our internal programs are a given.
How are they? I mean, I get staff salary and administration as a given, but the other programs are givens?
The housing program and the transportation program and redevelopment, yeah, they're established parts of our program.
And the what are the? Is it just housing, transportation,
and redevelopment?
And the Rangers Pantry?
Rangers Pantry we don't put any money into Rangers Pantry other than staff time.
Okay.
The food is all donated or purchased with donated funds. We don't purchase any of the food with CDBG funds.
How were those programs? I'm totally railroading this. I just need to be quiet. You guys need to shut me up. Gladys, Tasha, Vincent. I'm curious how they were established. Or like, are they ever revisited? Are there opportunities for the community to provide input on those established programs? And is that our role to help consider how those programs can better serve community members?
I mean, we listen to input from the community anytime it's offered to us. I've never, the established programs serve a valuable purpose, and I've never heard anybody question the need for those programs. If people were questioning it, we would listen to that. Absolutely. I mean, we don't work in a vacuum, but I've never heard anyone question the need for those programs. And that is how a portion of how we use the funds. Then after all of those are funded, that's how we determine each year what's available for public services and public facilities. So public services up to the cap, because public services, as you recall, or I hope you recall, has a cap. There's a percent, we can only use a certain percentage of our funds for public services. And then public facilities doesn't have a cap, but it does depend on what's available after the internal programs are funded.
I guess the thing that comes to me about that, dealing with the questioning the need or the value of those established programs, and I don't think that any of them are bad programs, but I don't believe that they actually well address the current needs. And I believe that if we had rethought that some of those, we could have developed some plans that would have directly addressed some of the needs that are actually problems on the streets of Fayetteville that are not being addressed. That from my unexperienced reading of what has been done before and what we've been told about HUD guidelines, that there would be a lot of things that could be done that are not being done. And it feels to me like it really did need to be reviewed again before that 5-year plan was put in place, and we're locked into those same programs again that really don't really meet needs that I personally am seeing. You know, and my role was to be thinking about low-income housing. Is really why I was on this board. And so I've been watching the homeless situation in Fayetteville now for, you know, the past year that we've been doing this, with the eye to thinking, is what we're doing addressing those needs? And I have to say, no, it's not. It is not meeting the needs of housing for low-income housing in Fayetteville. And there's so much need for that we could be addressing. And I believe that it really should be addressed in other ways than what the established programs are meeting. So in that sense, I think the established programs are inadequate. So that's my feedback about that.
One of the things you need to, and I don't know specifically what you're thinking of as far as projects, but one of the things that you need to keep in mind is a lot of the services to address those community types of needs would fall under the public services category. And there is a cap on how much money we can put into public services. There's a 15% cap on what we can put into public services. And that does limit our ability to meet community needs.
Well, I believe that were we to think broader than just the established programs, there could be other things that could be done. And the document that started this group clearly says that we should have the access, we should have the authority to look for other grants and consider other options.
Right.
And
so other grants,
I think we should be thinking about that.
Well, and other grants, that is something that is listed. The feedback that I've gotten from a couple of council members is, and it is just a couple, so I can't guarantee that it's the way all of the council members are thinking about it, is that they were wanting this group to be seeking grant opportunities for nonprofits. Not for the city, but now that doesn't mean that if you were seeking grant opportunities to share with nonprofits, that if you ran across something that you thought might be appropriate for the city, you could absolutely bring that to us and we would have the appropriate department look at that opportunity to see if it fits within their parameters, if they have the capacity to implement it. If that, you know, there would be different things that would have to factor in before the city would pursue a grant opportunity. But certainly if you become aware of something, you should absolutely feel free to bring it to our attention so that we can determine if it's something the city should pursue.
So just to kind of go back a little bit on this discussion regarding the purpose of the board and everything. I did reach out to a few city council members, past and present, to kind of, some of them were put in contact with me just because they had seen this and were questioning why we didn't know about it. I had spoke to one of them that was kind of instrumental in helping to put forth this proposal to create this board. And one of the issues that was highlighted to me is an example that I'll just kind of read through just to kind of give everybody the same overview of it, was that in 2018, the Fayetteville Housing Authority had a need for air conditioning at Willow Heights. This was during an issue with the possible sale of Willow Heights, and CDBG was identified as having the budget line eligible to fund them, but the deadline for applying was passed. The FHA staff was encouraged to apply for funds the following year and for FHA and community resources to work together to facilitate. The next year, the FHA applied and went through the process to be told that there was $0 in the program. In the meantime, the city council had approved the annual plan at the advice of staff with the budget reduction buried in the paperwork, and it was overlooked, and there was no public input or discussion. So what we were being told, the feedback that I'm getting is that, we're supposed to be kind of, I understand your points towards the advisory, basic against, an actual review board, but at the same time, the purpose is lined out. We're still, as far as we might not have a binding responsibility or any, skin in the game, so to speak, but that we were there to kind of look over the overview of these, see if there's room for improvement, get involved with community feedback. And I think those are things that are still lacking. I mean, the fact that even this public comment period that just ended, that there was only 4 people that showed up to the meeting. The one that was held in person, there were no attendees. So we still have a communication lapse somewhere, in getting the proper information to the proper people, I think. And I'm not sure, if that's something that we as a board need to be focusing on more, or we need to take that back to you guys and see what else is going on as far as the advocating and the assessments from the community. But I feel like there's just a breakdown there that's really, part of our being on the committee is kind of to facilitate and bring it together and make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page, where it seems like we're awfully broken right now. Different people are under different impressions, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of just look at it and start fresh in that aspect.
So that's why you called it an opportunity. Okay, all right.
Yeah, basically, to put that in small words, yes. Sorry, I've been putting together notes for like 2 weeks, so I'm kind of long-winded today.
Well, that really does emphasize the thing that is a big concern to me is it really feels like the communication has been difficult the whole time, and there's not adequate communication. And the fact that this whole thing came up without any notice to the board at all. And I acknowledge that you all think that we have this very tiny little piece to deal with, but the truth is, the city gave us a role that we feel a strong responsibility to maintain that role, and we were not allowed to have the access to the information to even consider that. So when they come to us and say, what about this? And we have no clue what had just happened. That was a serious breakdown in communication. And it really does need to be improved if we are going to be able to work together well. And I think all of us want this to work well because we all love our city. There really does need to be an improved communication across the board with the department, and a lot of communication with the community, and in our case, especially with the board, because I think absence of communication with her board is a serious problem for Yolanda. If she cannot tell what we need to know, we need a much clearer understanding with her about what kind of communication is adequate communication.
So, what I can tell you is when we do public comment, we make and that there may very well be a role for this group to help get the word out when we have public comment periods, but it's published in the paper, it's on the city website, it's on all the city social media websites, or not website, sites. We do press releases, the information, the opportunity to comment is out there. I mean,
the fact that the response is so poor is a pretty strong indication whatever's being done is not adequate.
I will say too
Uh,
that in the press release, there was no notification of an in-person. In the press release that came out about the reallocation, it was just one Zoom meeting. So the in-person one may have not been well attended because it was not included in the press release.
Okay, I'll make sure we're proofing those more closely in the future. I did not realize that was missing.
Just
And I kind of have to say that, I mean, as a member of this committee, I feel like maybe I shouldn't have to go scouring the city's website and social media and press releases and everything else to find out about things like this. Maybe I call it an expectation of privilege, but I don't know. I just, to me, it seems like if there's something going on and the city council members think we should have a say in it. Our fellow citizens of Fayetteville think that, obviously have an opinion on it that they've expressed to us. Then perhaps maybe we should have been informed through other channels as well, if we're going to help disseminate that information.
Okay.
I would agree. I think that this board really could be an extension of what the community's voice is. So to not have any knowledge of something coming up like this and having to wait for press release or city website updates, the literacy of reading those updates and can be confusing, even in this position. So to just expect the community to be able to receive that information, understand what it, and then respond. I think we should be an extension of allowing us to bridge that gap. And so we need to be aware of what's going on, more so than just finding out as a member of the community. We all, I know, sought a board position here to be able to do something for the city of Fayetteville. And I think that impact can be limited if we're not utilized to the potential of allowed us to be a board.
Well said,
I think
Jacob.
that's my main concern regarding this reallocation specifically, is just the amount of questions that were brought up, and then the response we received was strictly that it's administrative. I would like clarification further on the purpose of what we're doing.
I would agree on that too. That was the disconcerting part, was a lot of it was kind of put off as, that was not part of it. But with the community coming to us, I think it's a bad look when they come to us as committee members asking us questions and we are like, what are you talking about? We're not even aware of it. I think it's a bad look for us, and therefore, reflects back on the city as well too.
Mhm.
That, it's obvious, that there was a communication gap in the past that kind of led to this board being facilitated. And I think, we really need to get to the root of that in order to fully kind of embrace everything else as well. Jacob put it a lot better than I can into words, but I would agree that, trying to find information on the city website is very cumbersome. And even if you know what you're looking for, it can be hard to find that information. And, if we as board members have trouble with it, then, it's hard to educate the city and community members on how to better use that information and seek out that information when, we're not aware of it or don't know the best ways of going about it too.
maybe, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, no, and I hear what you're saying and I understand where you're coming from, and certainly we'll look at how we can communicate better. But also, as I've mentioned to you all in the past, the city has a notification system where if you want to be notified about certain things, and I've sent you those instructions before, I can certainly send them again, that you can sign up to receive certain notifications. So if that would be helpful to you, that's another tool that's out there to make you aware of different things that are going on, not just with our program, but with other areas of the city.
I think that was part of the concern too, Kelly, is many of us have notifications set up, and I think only one that I talked to actually received a notification about this press release. I could not find any record of an email being received, and I do have, tons of emails from the city that do come through every day on notifications of things,
Well, because I did go back just in case, and I did look at the media for people who signed up for media notifications, which is where press releases are, and all of ours were there. So if you're signed up for media notifications, you should have received it.
That didn't happen.
Well,
I also wonder if
who-
there, oh, go ahead, Vincent. Nope.
No, go ahead, Emily, please.
And there's something, no, I need to look something up. Go ahead.
My question is, who decides when how those releases are sent? I mean, but my impression that I got from the responses from Yolanda when we asked questions were that, it kind of bordered on contempt from her. And is she the one making the decision? Does she, who makes these decisions on where these notifications go and when they get sent? If somebody doesn't want to be questioned or doesn't want to be asked any questions, they could just as easily say, no, we're not going to send that out, or oops, I forgot.
No, so media releases go out at the same time that the newspaper ads run. Everything goes out at the same time. So the newspaper ads run I guess there's like a 1-day delay. The newspaper ads run on Sunday. The media releases go out on Monday to announce public comment periods. The newspaper ads run 2 consecutive Sundays. The media release goes to communications on Monday. They generally get it out the same day. That's also when it gets posted to the city website and to city social media.
Who in your office sends those out, Kelly?
I do.
Okay.
Well,
The high level.
I take that. Let me back up. Communications sends them out. I send them to communications. The city's communication department sends all the press releases out.
Okay.
So that they go through a central point so that different departments aren't doing their own things. So I draft the press release. I send it to communications. They are the ones that distribute it. And now there are lots of options on the city notification page. So like if you signed up for city clerk notifications, you're not going to get the press releases. You have to sign up for the media releases to get those. So there you have to look at. So I'm happy to send y'all information just to make sure you're signed up for the things you want to. The categories of the notify me that I think might be most applicable to what I'm hearing from you that you want to make sure you're aware of. I'd be happy to send an email and make sure you know which of those notify me categories are the ones that do which things, if that would be helpful to people.
I think that would be good information to have either way, because I'm not sure if that would have been included on the prior information that I forwarded to Jacob, so he might not have ever received that too. So.
Okay.
I think the high level point is, from what we are hearing from the community, what we are currently doing isn't, to Jacob's point, it is very hard for community programs to do their job if people don't know about them or have any opportunity to provide input on themselves being recipients of those community programs. So we can do a whole bunch of stuff in a vacuum, but if there's no opportunity for input or contribution from the community and from our community residents who are participants in these programs, then we are potentially not using them to the best of our ability. And that's our responsibility. And so I think that's what we're all here saying, is that we want to do as much as we can with the resources that the city has. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we are receiving community input and helping to facilitate that process and eventual incorporation into how we use these funds. So on that, I mean, and on that point and on our role, I do have to jump off, but I would just provide, I would just suggest that, maybe the opportunity is for us to look at the ordinance, look at the bullet points, look at what the intent was, and brainstorm ways that we can contribute with the resources that we have right now. And then other ways we think we could contribute if there were additional resources. And that can be, an opportunity for us to try and find those, or for us to think about resources that are locked up in places that may be able to be reallocated or reused in different ways. And I'm happy to do that with this team. In a special meeting, I feel like it could be a couple of hours. And so maybe if we calendar it correctly, then it's something that we could do without feeling rushed or whatever. I know also, before I jump off, we do have the grant workshop coming up soon. And so helping to make sure information gets out about that. I did notice you all are offering 2, and Zoom and in person, the ability for people to participate both ways. And I appreciate that and did notice that. But to our team, make sure everybody knows that those are happening in the next 10 days.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on, Emily. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being on. Much easier for me than it is for you, Glenn. All right. Y'all are great. Kelly, we do appreciate the hard work that you, I don't want to speak for, I know everybody does, but I appreciate the hard work that you and the team do. And I know it's not easy to be in compliant on a federal grant, having managed a lot of them myself. It is a scary place to be. And it is complicated and complex. And, we're not trying to tell you're not doing your job well. I think we're just trying to say, and Jacob said it perfectly, let's use this in the best possible way. And some of that just requires us better understanding and asking some tough questions. Bye, y'all. Good to see you.
All right.
Thanks, Emily.
Well, I had one other question. Sorry, Natasha.
No, go ahead.
I had a different question that had been bothering me, that the questions that we asked about what community needs assessments were done to decide the priorities. I really didn't get a sense from Yolanda's responses that that what she was thinking of as outreach. She called what she did, made decisions by outreach, and I'm not sure what that meant, but it felt to me like she really was not getting adequate input from the community, which is another reason why I believe this board was established, was to give that input. And I'd really like to know more about what she gets, how she gets input. For instance, a number of years ago, Omni Center did we've had a lot of different groups over the years. And for a couple of years, Yolanda would come to a group that we had that was the Civil Rights Roundtable. And she just attended the meetings and, gave input and talked at the meeting and stuff. And I'm wondering if maybe that is kind of one place where she was getting of outreach that she was doing to get input from the community. If maybe that's kind of what she was regarding as outreach, but I don't know. I'd kind of like to know, but that's not really the same as a community needs assessment that really would give her a broad overview of what kind of needs the community as a whole needed. And I'd really like to know more about what she's getting as input, how she actually manages her outreach, and what kind of reports she develops to use to actually make her decisions. Because she never said she had any reports. She never said that she had. And to say they're submitted to HUD tells us nothing. It doesn't really tell anybody what information she got to make these decisions and from whom. Was it a broad-based view that she could get from it? Or was she just doing like when she came to our group and we enjoyed having her there? It was great that she was there. But, she was seeing one little cross section, one little hunk of Fayetteville. And depending on which hunks you visit would have a big change, you'd get a much different picture of what the needs were based on what she was getting from the Civil Rights Roundtable and what she might have been getting from St. James Baptist Church or something, And so what was her methodology and kind of what did she take from it that really we could kind of understand better how she's making these decisions?
Mhm. Okay.
I'm not expecting you to know the answer to that question, Kelly, but
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping that she will be watching this and she can see kind of what I'm really hoping for information about.
Yeah. And I mean, and that probably does need to come primarily from her, but I can speak to the fact that we do seek and get information from a variety of sources in the community on a regular basis, not just Yolanda, everybody in our department. She does sit on lots of community groups. I remember when she was going to the Civil Rights Roundtable, she's a board member of the COC, which brings together a lot of the community players on a monthly basis. She's on several committees and groups. She's involved with a variety of things. The rest of us are also involved in community groups and activities. We are talking to and hearing from local nonprofits all the time about what their needs are, not just during the grant application process. They interact with us throughout the year. We get calls from citizens daily, not just about the programs that we provide. We appear to be very well known in the community as a source of information because we get calls all the time asking us, where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? And we know where to send them. So we do hear from the community and local service providers and things all the time. We don't work in a vacuum, and we do. That doesn't mean that we can't use help. That doesn't mean that this group might not be able to come up with some methods to increase the feedback and information we get. So, I'm not saying we have all the answers or anything, but we're interacting with all kinds of areas of the community. Yolanda talks to the council members on a regular basis, and they hear from their constituents. So, we do get information from a lot of sources. I can tell you that much. And I know that doesn't completely answer your question, but I do want to share that we get information from lots of sources all of the time. And we do listen to what we're being told.
And how do you record the feedback you get? How's it recorded to kind of use it as data?
At this point in time, not most of the time, but so we'll look at that.
Okay.
And the other thing too, I don't want to, I hear what you all are saying. So I want to make sure that that I hear what you're saying. But there were a lot of limitations with the COVID money. A lot of the things that people were saying that they wanted us to use it for were just they weren't an option. They were an option. They're potential options for the regular CDBG money, but the COVID money had a lot of rules placed on it, and that I think that a lot of people look at the regular CDBG guidelines and didn't understand that some of the parameters around the CARES Act money, it was different than the the regular CDBG funds. And I get that that's confusing for people. And I know it was confusing for people that there were people who, because the mortgage assistance was classified as a housing assistance, which it was, but there were a lot of people thinking we were pulling money out of our housing program. We weren't pulling money out of our housing program. We were reallocating the mortgage assistance money because the demand that we were told was there, and that we're still being told. One of the people that I talked to during the reallocation process mentioned mortgage assistance has a huge community need. Nobody was responding to the program. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. We probably had about a dozen requests for applications, and we only had 2 that were returned. And we helped both of those people. But there's a time frame for spending that money out, and that's why the administrative process of a reallocation came into play. And again, I'm not trying to minimize or any of your concerns about the process, but I do want to mention again that we don't do reallocations very often. They generally aren't needed. The money that we allocate to the subrecipients, to the internal programs, it generally gets used. The COVID money was kind of an unusual one-time thing. And, I'm not saying we've never done reallocations before, but they're pretty rare. They're not something that we have to do very often.
Well, since that came up, am I right that I heard that the application that Yolanda had to send in has been sent in already?
The reallocation request has been sent to HUD, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I just wasn't sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was essentially what she had originally intended.
Mm-hmm.
So the public input really didn't have any impact.
I mean, we submitted the public comments we received were submitted with the reallocation request. So HUD has that information.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. I think that was most of my questions.
Sorry, Glass, I didn't mean to cut you off. Will that public comment be available at any point?
Yeah, I can share that with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great. I'm just curious to know because I know what I received personally, so I'm just wondering, if there was anything else. I mean, I think part of the confusion, there's still so many questions, like, even if this is approved, I think there's so many unanswered things that, in looking forward that we could address up front to where that would create such a barrier after the fact. There's still questions about, how exactly the community is going to apply, what kind of services will be covered, if there's any limits, how the priority will go and things like that, and exactly how this program will be monitored too. And I think, that just goes back to if we had better communication and we're able to kind of get that feedback more readily available, or I don't know exactly how it might affect the process itself, but it's just, I think there's a lot of questions that could have been brought forth before. And I don't know if at this point, that's something that we would take when it's presented to City Council, but I don't even know if City Council generally reads this kind of information out loud, or, where exactly I should filter those questions, I guess, that are still remaining out there.
I guess I would suggest initially that the questions should come to us, and then if the questions if we're not the appropriate place to respond to those questions, then we can let you know who to direct those specific questions to.
Okay. I'll be sure to get all the follow-up ones together and send those, because I wasn't sure, since the comment period had ended, if I would still be able to receive an answer, or how exactly that works. So
I mean, the reality is, since this particular public comment period is over, the questions are not the questions. Probably what needs to happen is what if any changes need to happen moving forward? Because we can't go back and change something that's already happened.
exactly. But I think this is definitely a huge learning lesson that kind of definitely brought our attention to all the areas that are lacking and that we can kind of get some clarification on. So I appreciate you going through the long list of these, Kelly. I know
Absolutely.
it isn't all your responsibility to answer these questions, but I appreciate you giving us the time and the space to discuss this.
Yeah,
I think it was important that we kind of got it out in the open and not the elephant in the room type situation.
Right. And I'm always going to answer your questions to the best of my ability. And if you ask a question I don't have an answer to, then I'm going to work on getting that answer for you. That's my role here. I hope I've been doing that all along, and I will certainly continue to do that.
I think we feel a good bit of confidence in your integrity on that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Are there any other questions or comments related? I mean, I know we have some follow-up things, of course, that we can, that I'm noting, for us to go over on our next meeting, but is there anything further that we wanted to bring up tonight as far as the role and opportunities?
I think I just would like to, sorry, I don't know if I cut someone off.
Go ahead, Jacob.
Just kind of the action.
But I was going to just bug Tim to say something because he hasn't said anything the whole time.
Yeah, Tim, you're next. But
Sorry.
I guess, with the conversation we've had tonight, my question would be, what is this just strictly feedback right now that's going to be given, and we will await to kind of have some suggestions given from the division, or is this something that our board needs to discuss further on, like what actions we would like to propose and see how the department feels about it?
I think it's important that we get the information, that whatever documentation that Kelly's able to get together for us, I think having documentation is an important thing, to actually have something to go back on. But to the end, as far as the board, I think Emily mentioned a good idea as far as, maybe creating a subcommittee to just take a look at the ordinance, sit down and kind of come up with, questions, answers, ideas or whatever it might be that we could bring back perhaps next month's meeting and discuss further. When we had, more time to just focus on each of those bullet points, separately from our regular meeting. Does that sound favorable to the group, or what are your thoughts?
I think she was talking to you, Jacob.
He wanted you.
Oh.
I felt like she was
Sorry, I'm just sitting on
you.
mute. Yes, that sounds fine with me. Yeah, I think that's a good action to take, kind of next steps to look back on this situation and then move forward and hopefully make a few changes that may be beneficial in the future. And like Kelly said, if this was a rare instance, reallocations don't happen very often. It's still good for us to kind of learn through, aware of how that may be able to take place in the future.
And I'll just put out there that certainly it's appropriate and fine for you to do work groups that are just advisory board members. If you're ever doing a work group and my availability to answer questions from the city perspective would be helpful, you just need to make me aware of that. I can make myself available to you. Certainly I don't need to be included in those, but if it would be helpful to you, you just would need to let me know that. So
thank you, Kelly. That's definitely appreciated. because it might be something that, it's good for us to kind of go over and develop our questions and then bring you into the discussion and take what questions back we have, or, we'll just
Mhm.
kind of see what we get together and see whether or not, it's something that we think we can get through in a meeting, or if we need to schedule a
Mhm.
separate meeting with you to go over.
Right,
But thank you for being available for that.
absolutely.
So I will send
Okay.
out the information after our meeting today, and kind of just see, who's interested in being a part of that group, and, when we want to schedule that and get that going, and then go from there on that section of it.
I think we'll give Tim at least a chance to say something.
I will definitely be available for a work group.
Okay.
I'm listening, and I've been reading about what we do in the city ordinance, because I'm confused now.
Right?
Okay, we're all there with you, Tim. We're gonna get
Yep. Yep. I'm in.
All right.
any other things that we want to discuss on this particular point?
I think it was a good conversation. I'm glad we got to have it.
Yes, me too. It's a lot easier to do it this way than, emails and text messages. I think in general, the message can get lost in translation a lot of times, and things don't come through so clearly
Yeah.
as you can just in regular conversation.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll move on to the next section, which is our community resources information and updates.
Yeah, so I didn't think to put this on the agenda, but I will just say we had our 15th annual CDBG in the park last Friday, and it was an excellent event. We had a great turnout, and even though it was hot, we had quite a few people and a lot of kids, and it went really well. So just to let you know that. So the subrecipient grant workshop is coming up. We are doing 2 sessions this year. We're going to see how that goes, and then we'll make a determination moving forward. But we heard the feedback from this group about offering an additional session. So we will be offering, the first session will be Saturday, July 30th from 10:30 to 12:30 in room 111 at City Hall. And I can email this information to you. And then Monday, August 1st, the first working day of August has always been our traditional day to do the workshop. It will be offered from 2 to 4 o'clock in room 326, and it will be a hybrid. People attending the Monday meeting will have the option of being there in person in room 326 or joining us via Zoom. And then the applications will all be due. They're always due the last working day of August. And this year that will be August 31st. So they'll be due 5 o'clock, August 31st or before.
Just want to say thank you for you guys facilitating that second class, and also, giving the hybrid option too. I'm curious to see, what the participation will be. I'm hoping we'll see an increase, in participation and applications both, because I'd really like to get involved in the process. But
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, exactly, especially having it on a weekend day. Will be beneficial to a lot of people, I'm sure. Was there anything else as far as your side of things, Kelly?
No, that's it right now.
Okay. So the next bullet point I added was just community insights and interactions. I just wanted us to have a space that, if we were hearing concerns from the community, or, had seen anything ourselves, this is where we could kind of have a space to bring up those concerns, find out, if or when that might apply to us, or if it applies to somewhere else, and kind of, just be able to not really consider those public comment per se, since they're coming from us and not directly the community members, but be able to convey that message, if that all makes sense here. part of why I wanted to bring that up, Kelly, and you mentioned that your department facilitates a lot of providing information and considered a great resource for things.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to kind of ask a general question. There were specific instances that were sent to me, but as far as housing concerns for our low to moderate income, if we're seeing or being reported to on conditions that are less than favorable, who would we go to with those type of concerns and those type of instances? I know that's not really your department per se, but I'm not really sure, honestly, where to go.
Can you give me an example of a type of concern?
So one of the examples, which this one I'm not sure if anybody saw on the news, this is actually being resolved now, but apparently there were some plumbing issues at High Point that were causing some sewage backup.
Mhm.
The managers and everybody were contacted, nothing was done. Well, the news crew actually went out there last weekend, and now, something's finally getting started.
Mhm.
And I've heard reports from other low income residents in our community that, not particularly that same issue, but other issues such as, water leaks or mold issues. And I'm not sure. I feel like I need to pass along that information, but I'm not sure the exact person to go through or who handles that kind of thing.
Okay, so particularly when you're talking about landlord issues, Arkansas offers very little protections for renters.
Yes.
Landlords have very little accountability for having to keep their properties in good condition. So usually when we get those types of calls, we refer those individuals, like if repairs and stuff aren't being done, we usually refer those individuals to legal aid, because landlord tenant issues are one of the things legal aid can help with. The city does not have, because of the state laws, the city cannot do very much in most instances. When the city can do something, it's going to be the building safety division that can do it. But a lot of times there's nothing that can be done. Now I know that we were contacted, a city council member and a local organization reached out to us about the High Point situation. And I know that we have helped them get in touch, because High Point has some involvement with HUD. So we were able to direct them to the appropriate person at HUD to take those concerns to. Now, HUD is also limited in what they can do. HUD, to the best of my knowledge, HUD does not have the ability to force a landlord or a property owner to make repairs. What HUD does have the ability to do is to pull their funding from that property until such time as the repairs and stuff are done. So then it becomes a matter of, is the property owner willing to, do they want the federal money bad enough to do the repairs and stuff that are needed? I know of I'm not going to obviously name names, but several years ago, I know of a local property that had their HUD funding pulled because they weren't doing the work they were supposed to do. And they were able to get things back in place, and they now receive HUD funding again. But so HUD can't literally force them to do the repairs, but if HUD's aware of the problems, they do have some mechanisms to, if the property wants to continue getting that funding, they have some resources to say, if you want to keep getting the funding, then you have to take care of the issues. So, but so I do know that some people that are concerned about the High Point situation, we did provide them with the HUD contact information for that.
Great, that's good to know, because yeah, the majority of the ones that I've heard, it's coming from nonprofits that I'm involved in that are getting feedback when they're going out into these communities and, just talking one-on-one with the residents and learning about the conditions that they're living in. And like you said, Arkansas does not have renter laws. And,
Mhm.
I knew that HUD didn't really have a whole lot of force either, but, I feel
Mhm.
like maybe the more people that actually get out there and, present the information to them, the more likely maybe
Mhm.
something will happen eventually.
Right. Yeah, and unfortunately, the property owners and landlords in Arkansas have a lot of sway with the legislature, which is why the laws are not changing. Hopefully, I mean, I know that there are people actively working on trying to get the laws changed, and hopefully they will get better over time. But there's a pretty strong coalition of people that have a lot of sway with the legislator, from what I understand, that allows Arkansas to continue to not be good on tenant rights.
And curious too, to the mention of HUD being able to take away funding, do you know if that prevents them for a certain period? Which, I mean, this might be a HUD question, but I had heard
Yeah.
mentioned that if they take away their funding, that they would not be able to receive funding for like a certain period of time afterwards before they'd be eligible to apply again.
Yeah, that would be a HUD question, and I don't know the answer to that. The only reason I know about the other situation is it was a property that we had worked with our Hearth program, and so we became aware when they were no longer on the approved HUD list. And like I said, and I do know that they are back on it, but I don't know if that was simply that they corrected the issues and were able to go right back on, or if they had to correct the issues and wait a certain time. I don't know the details of that with those programs.
I might have to look into that in my spare time. I'm curious as, the discussion came up, and so just trying to learn exactly how exactly the process works and the points of contacts for certain things.
Yeah, no, I can certainly, I don't have it right in front of me, obviously, but I can certainly point you in the direction of the HUD department that handles those units that get HUD money directly. So that would probably at least get you started on your quest for information.
There's always a quest for information for me. Ongoing learning, it keeps you sharp, right? So I'm not sure, does anybody else have anything like feedback from the community or anything they'd like to share?
Since I've been in Scotland for 3 weeks, I feel very cut off. So I'll have to give you feedback another time.
I did want to mention one thing, which I'm not sure, I just kind of got a reminder about it today, that the Yvonne Richardson Center is doing a back to school event on August 6th, I think. There's going to be a bunch of things together, but it's good information to pass along to the community for anybody that might be in need as far as school supplies and things like that. I think the event is actually from 9 to 4 that Saturday. All right. Well, unless anybody else has anything to add, as far as agenda items for next week, we've kind of discussed a couple things. Is there anything else that anybody would like to be added?
So if memory serves me, you all would like me to do a refresher on the grant review process, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
Because you'll be doing that in September, assuming that we get the applicants. So
That would be
And to
nice.
mention that, I know we had discussed meeting in person for that one, I think. Was it this August or the September one that we had discussed meeting in person?
I
Did you
don't
say
remember.
you're suggesting that we meet in person in September?
I was thinking that we discussed last time meeting in person either August or September, and I cannot remember if it was to go over the refresher or for the actual. I'll have to look back at my notes.
Yeah, I'd
I'll
have to
circle
look
back
back
on that one.
through my notes. I sort of feel like it was for the actual grant review, but I could be wrong about that.
I'll double check and let everybody know for sure what I find on that. Okay, and then we should have also some feedback regarding the subcommittee. You know, should have some updates at least on going over that to present in August as well. Any other topics or concerns or anything?
I think we just need to continue the conversation. I think that's kind of the basic agenda item, is that there's more to talk about there. Kelly, do you think Yolanda would want to come and talk to us for the August meeting?
I can certainly ask.
She might like a chance to interact.
I can certainly ask her.
Okay.
Great. Well, unless anybody has anything else, then I will move to adjourn.
I'll second
All in
that.
favor? Or I think I said that backwards, didn't I? I always get that mixed up.
Aye.
I motion to adjourn. There we go.
Yeah, I'll second it. Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you so
now
much,
the
everyone.
vote.
Aye.
I
Yes, amen.
Gladys looks
Aye.
tired.
So the
Well,
meeting's
thank you,
adjourned.
everyone.
Till next time, everybody.